Welcome to
Rough Draft Podcast.
Rough Draft Podcast.
Rough Draft Podcast.
The Rough Draft Podcast.
the Rough Draft Podcast.
Rough Draft Podcast.
Welcome to the Rough Draft Podcast.
The Rough Draft Podcast. Welcome to the Rough Draft Podcast.
Ready to turn the rough drafts of today into the masterpieces of tomorrow? Let's get started.
All right, let's dig in. Today, joining us are two incredible guests who bring a wealth of experience and insight. We have Ashlei Adams, the Technology Director from Merkel ISD, and Vince Moore, the Chief Technology Officer from Breckenridge ISD, both of which are rural West Texas districts not very far from Abilene. So welcome to the Rough Draft Podcast. We're glad you guys are here.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Glad you guys are here. Thank you.
So Ashlei and Vince have both been leading conversations on rural school districts technology at TCEA and the Education Service Center events over the past couple years. So we're excited to continue that discussion here today. Our focus isn't just on the struggles these districts face, though sometimes there are plenty, but also on their successes and the unique considerations that come with serving in a rural community. So we're going to explore some of those different challenges here today. So to kind of kick things off, let's talk about significant budget constraints. Did you guys know that nearly 80% of schools are facing a deficit budget challenge?
We've lived it. We had a deficit budget last year. This year we do have a balanced budget, although I think it's a balanced budget that we know we're going to have to kind of skirt at the edge at the end. And it's tough. It's tough because we've got a lot of needs. Breckenridge is in the mode right now. We're trying to replace aging technology infrastructure, which is incredibly expensive. And every time we go to the school board to ask for more money, they kind of give me the side eye. So it's a tough time right now.
It is, for sure.
It is a tough time. I agree that any of the districts that I know in this area have had to adopt deficits. Some of them tremendous. I know Abilene had a huge deficit, and Clyde had one, but it was a little bit less. And it is a struggle. So we understand.
Absolutely. So when talking about resources and having to budget for those things, do you guys feel like rural schools have enough resources to be able to teach students the way that we need to?
And that's not a trick question.
I would say after COVID, with the ESSER funds, things were really great. You know, we were able to provide more Chromebooks, one-to-one devices for our students. But now that those funds are gone,
Right.
we are in a good spot right now. But how do we maintain and keep that going without those funds for the future? Because eventually those devices are going to have to be replaced. And so I think budget-wise, that's kind of where we're looking at is, how are we going to maintain this? We were able to buy all this great stuff, but now how do we, maintain it in our budget without those extra ESSER funds? The other thing are our software. Our admin and just teachers were able to buy a lot of different programs to meet those needs. But now that and those were bought with ESSER funds. But now that those funds are not here, we're having to really look at and evaluate those programs and see if they're, if we can afford to continue them, and are they being utilized to make it worth that purchase? So that's kind of where our biggest struggle right now is now that those funds are gone, how are we going to maintain?
And I think during
in the
that
future?
time, the school districts picked up additional staff that now they're going to have to make some decisions on. I mean, the understanding was at the time that, look, these funds may be temporary, and right now it looks like, yeah, they were temporary, but some folks are going to have to make some tough decisions.
Yeah, that's one of the issues we've run into with our budget is we realized that we kind of created some positions that we see the use of them. We see how worthwhile they are, and now we've got to absorb that cost with no increase from the state. And another thing you mentioned, you mentioned we bought a lot of devices and everything, and all these programs and everything. And when they're brand new, we roll out these big, here's this program, here's this device, it's great, let's use it. And now we're 4 years removed, and there's not as much of a push at the beginning of the year to teach teachers how, and with teacher turnover,
Right.
how many of those devices are getting used, not appropriately, but like to their best potential, and how many of those programs are being used across the district with fidelity. I feel like Merkel, y'all are in a little better place than us because y'all do have an instructional tech that is able to go in, and I was hoping to be able to do that in my role, and I just haven't been able to. But I feel like in our district we're very piecemeal. Like the programs that some grade levels are using and are doing really great things with, it may be isolated to that grade level and not being used. And so then I get asked, hey, we want to purchase this program. And I'm like, well, we've only got 7 teachers using it. And then this other competing program, they're like, oh, we want to buy this. I'm like, well, there's only 4 teachers using that. And it's kind of, where do we put our thumb down and say, no, we're not using that, and that. We're using this one product.
And I think every district deals with that to some degree. I know that we do.
Yeah.
And we've run analytics on some of our applications, and we find out at the end of the school year it was used very little.
Right.
But in order to move forward and work with budgeting, we try to let the staff know that, hey, look, we're going to try to phase this out. Well, then there's an uproar.
Right.
And those 7 people that are using it either start using it a lot to try to show that it is being used, or, the principal says, look, we have to have it, and then we renew, and sometimes we don't renew, but it is a struggle because different groups, different grade levels use different applications, and unfortunately, salespeople do a great job sometimes, and it looks like the best until next year when the best comes out and replaces the one from previous year.
Well, and it's tough because, even teacher to teacher, they have what they prefer to use with their kids, and so that's going to look different. Also, campus to campus, sometimes you can buy just a school license, but some of them want you to buy a district license, or if you buy it for just one campus and then somebody at another campus finds out that y'all purchased it and they want access to it as well, that's tough. And I know one way to kind of gauge that is to try and survey teachers, but I know you guys did that in Merkel. I don't remember the exact question that y'all had formatted it, but I think teachers just kind of voted on what they had heard of, not necessarily what they were using. So really, that didn't give y'all good data either.
Right. Yeah, that's a hard way. I have found that using classroom analytics, we did purchase that. ClassLink analytics, and that has helped because you can go in and put what you paid for the program, and then monitor the usage. And so I think that's a great program to use to try to get that data because sometimes teachers say they're using it, but you can ask how often are you using it, but you don't always get really good data. And part of the problem is not really that the teachers don't want to use it. It's just maybe they don't have enough training on it. We buy these really good programs, and it's not that it's a bad program. It's just there's not enough time for staff development, and so they don't use it with fidelity, and they don't It's not that they don't want to; it's just they don't know how sometimes, Right. But the time constraint of how to get them trained.
And the time constraint of them in the classroom, they've got so many things they're trying to get done on a daily basis. You and I are both in a 4-day district, and so they're trying to maximize their time. And so whenever I come in and say, "Hey, here's this great tool," they're like, "I'm barely surviving right now. I'm barely able to get this all in. I'm not gonna, even if I can show them, look, this is gonna make this activity so much better or so much more enjoyable or so much easier for you." It's still, there's a heavy lift on that beginning part to get them to buy into the different programs and things. And a lot of times they're using stuff we don't even realize.
Yeah.
Right.
For instance, Go Guardian and Pear Deck are partners. And I've just found out that we've got several teachers who are using Pear Deck daily. I didn't know we had hardly anybody using it every day. And but it's a part of their daily routine that they use this Pear Deck. So now if I'm making a decision about Go Guardian, I have to think about the fact that, that may affect what they're doing on their daily basis,
And sometimes you don't find out what they're using until you cut it
Until you
off.
cut it
Right.
off, yes.
Start yelling. So
Yeah.
it happens.
For sure. Let's talk a little bit about the impact of legislation. Does the potential of school choice, is that going to affect rural schools?
I think it'll affect rural schools far more than it'll affect urban schools and suburban schools, because basically it's going to funnel funding away from our public schools to channel into these other venues, which we don't have. There's not a private school in Breckenridge, Texas. That I know of. I mean, maybe there will be one that springs up, but that's just money out of our pockets that then is not actually giving any of our students a choice. We had a state representative for a few years, Glenn Rogers, who was primaried out last year, and he has since become the champion of rural public education on this issue, and he's posting op-eds and he posted one just recently about how it's the most detrimental thing to rural education in like 100 years. We have I wouldn't say sizable, but we have pockets of homeschool families in our town, whether they're doing it for religious reasons or just choice or whatever it is, and they've even started coming out saying that they're against the voucher program because it's not going to help them. They're like, this is not helping anybody but a select few.
Yeah.
So,
and it is tough for small communities. I don't see how it could benefit if you don't have a choice.
Right.
I mean, in the name itself, it's going to be tough. In big cities, you have options, but I don't see that. And just like Vince was saying, that may sprout private schools up in every little community. But as small as the population is, it just seems kind of tough to see that happen.
a good friend of mine, she homeschools her daughters, and she's one of those, sometimes you hear about people who homeschool their kids, and are they really getting good homeschooling? I don't know. This person, they're doing it the right way. Yeah. These kids are phenomenal kids. They're smart kids. They're learning. They're doing all the right things. And one of the reasons they choose to homeschool is because they don't want to be burdened with things like state testing.
Yeah.
And so she's like, well, okay, great. So you're going to possibly give us money, but now you're going to force us to take this test. We don't want to do that.
Right.
And so where's our choice in that matter? And y'all both, Clyde and Merkel, are close enough to Abilene that I think y'all, even though y'all are decidedly rural, there are people in your districts that may come into St. John's or Abilene Christian or whatever it is. But Breckenridge, we're an hour away from that.
I was having this discussion with somebody that had lived out of state, actually lived in Arkansas for a while, and if I understood the person correctly, Arkansas actually requires tests for homeschool.
Really?
And that brings up an interesting point for Texas. Does that mean that if this passes, that the state may eventually, mandate tests for homeschool? That's yet to be seen.
There's something to be said there for the accountability piece of what are kids actually learning if they're being homeschooled.
Right.
Like you said, Vince, there's some people doing it the right way, but there's a lot of people, and they think that opening a computer every day is homeschooling, and then the kids come back at some point and they're way behind. So that might help in some instances.
Well, I hope there's a lot more discussion about this subject before a decision's made. It seems like there's just a lot of facets that need to be addressed before.
Well, and we talked about it the other day, but just because families receive X amount of money doesn't mean that the private schools can't then up whatever their tuition cost is.
Exactly.
So it might still not be enough for you to afford whatever that school is going to cost you.
And I think it's so telling that the first thing we asked, the first conversation piece we had here is deficit budgets and struggling to pay for things, and then we segue right into here's legislation that's going to make that even worse.
Yeah.
It's just...
It's a good point.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So you guys talked a little bit about having devices and software and managing those. How do you guys maintain student devices such as Chromebooks? What does that look like?
So at Merkel, we have, at the high school, we have a Chrome crew. And so we train them how to replace screens, how to do power washes, just the basic maintenance on Chromebooks. Nice. And so if a kid, has an issue with a Chromebook, they bring it to the library. Throughout the day, those kids are, cycled through. I think we have 3 right now. And so, that Chromebook will come in, they'll replace the screen, fix it, whatever, and return it back to the kid. So that has taken a big burden off of the technology department so that we don't have to hardly ever mess with a high school device that it has an issue. And then we have a tech that her main job is just Chromebooks for 2nd through 8th. So
does she coordinate? Does she work with the campus, like at the high school, to make sure they have parts? And
yes, and if they have an issue, that there's something that they can't figure out, that she goes and helps them. But for the most part, that most of it is screens, and a power wash fixes 90% of your issues, or like a keyboard or a battery issue. Mm-hmm. But broken hinges every once in a while. But she gets them whatever parts they need, and we've been lucky on screens that we haven't really had to buy screens in a while because we take the screens out of our old aging devices, and that's been the best thing. I just hope that it doesn't get to a point where those
They don't fit.
don't fit.
Don't tell the Chromebook companies.
Right.
They'll find a way
Yes,
to monetize
maybe we
that.
should cut that part out. But that's kind of how we maintain the breakage and that kind of stuff. We don't have cases on our devices. Have never had them. We've been one-to-one for a long time. I just haven't seen the cost of the breakage enough to warrant the cost of the cases. And so, it's been okay for us. Second grade are in carts. First and second grade are in carts. Third through fifth, the kids do, take them with them from class to class, but then they charge them in their homeroom at the end of the day. Middle school, they don't take them home. They pick them up first at their 8th period. First thing before school starts, they go to their 8th period, pick up their Chromebook, use it all day, and at the end of the day, charge it in the cart in the 8th period. And then high school get to take theirs home. So it's always middle school is our biggest problem. Our most breakage is in middle school, but I think that's just an age thing. So
Right, part of it.
Yeah, we have. Oh, go ahead.
No, I just was gonna ask if the high schoolers, is that part of a class, or how do they get
it's a
involved
local
with
credit.
that?
Mhm.
Okay.
So, and I don't know, they might work it in with some kind of CTE pathway, but some of them it's just a local credit. But
Yeah, no, I think
they're
that's
mainly
really cool.
juniors and seniors that get to do that. So, and we usually have them work with us a little bit in the summer, and so we can train them over the summer. But it's worked out well for us. So.
Yeah, we are. We don't have a Chrome crew. I'm interested in that. We have a technician that kind of focuses mostly on our Chromebooks. We also are carted from 1st grade through 7th grade, actually. 8th graders are in cases, but they get to take theirs home. In high school, they're not in cases unless they choose to get one, which I think I have 2 that chose to get a case.
Wow.
Out of 370, but they take theirs home. And as far as managing our breakage, we purchased a lot of devices with ESSER and ECF money just a few years ago. So most of our fleet has been under warranty up until this month, actually. So we're just now starting to really have to pour some effort into some of these devices, mostly the elementary ones. But yeah, it's kind of the same thing, screens. A power wash, it's amazing how many times a kid will come in and say, nothing's working. You just reset it, and all of a sudden it's magic. But we have staff in the libraries that kind of triage some of that. I should probably do a better job of training them to triage some of the more pressing issues. My wife is the district librarian, so whenever I came on as tech director, she was very adamant that we try to remove as much of the technology out of the librarians' hands as possible because it had gotten to where they were managing everything. They were putting labels on, they were enrolling devices, they were doing everything. And so I've tried to take that away, and now I need to push a little bit back, I think. Hopefully she doesn't listen to this podcast.
I think what's worked well in our libraries is when the device is treated as an asset like a library book. And all they really do is check them in, check them out, write them up for repair. Unless they've realized that it's really simple. They can do a power wash, but they don't do anything more than that, and then they just send it over here, and we have the technician to take care of that. So we'd have to have extra staff if the librarians weren't involved because there's 4 campuses. It would be a huge undertaking to try to manage the breakage or the repairs. So
This is kind of off. I'm just curious though. What's been the most interesting damage to a Chromebook story that y'all have seen?
Well, I'm gonna go first because she's probably gonna beat me. I know hers, and it's pretty great. Honestly, the most exciting one for me was when I got a phone call during summer school. A teacher was panicking. Like, what do I do? What do I do? This kid threw up on 4 Chromebooks. 4? And I was like, oh dear. Apparently there were 4 kids working in a group, and this kid just
everywhere.
Instantaneous vomit all over all 4 devices. And luckily they were some of our oldest in our fleet. And so I said, you just put those into a trash bag and I will take care of them. And I think they I think they got recycled. Got hosed down and recycled.
Yeah.
But I haven't had anything cool like Ashley's.
Well, which one are you thinking? I've
thinking
got several.
Well, I'm thinking about the one that was on that rug.
Okay, that's what I was going to say.
That's my favorite one.
Yeah, so we had a Chromebook that they had it sitting on a rug in a classroom, and the battery overheated and caught fire. And so the whole building had to be evacuated, and yeah, the battery just, and so then like we were worried about that model, you know, so we had to go pull that model from every classroom of the elementary, and we did find some more swollen batteries from that model. And anyway, we had to work with HP, and they replaced it and sent us probably about 50 batteries to replace after that incident. But yes, it did catch the rug
crazy.
on fire. It was a little wild. So, but yeah, so have to send out the email. Don't leave them on carpet. You know,
Right.
charging. So.
I did have the one. We got brand new devices from ECF, and it was mid-year. But I was like, you know what? We're going to roll these out now. It's great. We're so excited. Literally handed a brand new device to a student. They went back to their classroom, and they rubbed Play-Doh into the keyboard. Within 30 seconds, I got a phone call. Same teacher, by the way, that had the throw-up computers.
Yeah.
She's like, so-and-so just rubbed Play-Doh into their keyboard. And I'm like, 30 seconds. It was gone. I mean, we cleaned it all out. It was fine. But
We had to throw up one too, and I just was like, that device can go away.
Well, and that's basically what we've told Darren here. If it becomes an issue, I mean, if you
It was
make
a
the call and
biohazard.
decide, it can go. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
yeah.
And at some point, you gotta draw a line and say, hey, you know, that's not that's going to the recycler. But we have a new one this year. This is one that we've never had in the past, but it was a washing machine.
Oh, wow.
Actually, ended up in the washing machine.
Did they throw the whole backpack in there?
No, what happened was they think that the Chromebook was sitting on the bed and the laundry was
sheets.
bundled up and thrown in the washing machine. Well, I think, let's see, it's been repaired, and I think everything except for maybe the upper or the lower plastic didn't have to be replaced, but it basically destroyed it. And it was funny because the technician walked into my office and says, hey, he was holding it, you know, horizontally, and he says, hey, can you notice anything about this? And I didn't know which one he was talking about, but I looked at it, and he had a definite bow in it. I mean, the whole thing, you could tell it was up against the drum, and the weight was pushing on it, and it had a new shape to it. So,
Yeah.
But that was the first, that was a new one on us, washing
Yeah.
machine.
Okay.
How often are you guys cycling in new devices?
So I, even though we were getting the ESSER and the ECF funds to buy, you know, large quantities, I have always bought 1 to 2 grade level sets per year. And that's just what we've always budgeted. And so even though that was coming down, I just continued that so that we hopefully, you know, we're going to have to replace 300 at once.
Right.
So I try to buy 1 to 2 grade levels a year, usually like 2nd and 6th grade or 6th and 9th grade get new ones. But now that they've increased the auto
AUE,
expiration date or whatever on Chromebooks, that has helped a lot. It's not so much now that they expire, it's that
They fall
they're not
apart.
gonna make it. This year's freshmen, their 8th grade year, they were rough, and so I didn't give them new ones their freshman year like I normally do. And so right now, some of them are hanging by a thread. So I'm gonna have to replace some of theirs, but some grade levels, groups of kids are just way worse, and I don't know what it is, but when they're that way, they don't get new ones as often.
That's fair.
Historically, we have not been on a set cycle. We're just now starting to get on that because the ESSER and ECF was able to supply enough devices to hold us over. I got, like half a grade level's worth last year just to kind of pad my high school devices. But starting this year, I'm going to start doing about a grade level a year, maybe 2 if I can swing it. But and this is probably on the idea of topics here, but the upfront cost is so much that for me, you know, grade level, that's 100 to 110 devices at $350, $400 a pop. That's a huge chunk of my budget.
Yeah, it is.
Huge. And so I'm looking into device as a service, leasing. They don't like the word leasing in school business offices, so they call it device as a service, where you pay it out over 4 years. They're always under warranty. Then at the end, they can either be purchased for a nominal fee or sent back and replaced with the new version or extended another year or whatever. So I'm looking into that as a way to get new devices that we need with the limited budget that we have.
And it is a tough call. I know that, you can't make everybody happy. And I'm one of those folks that when I found out that Google was only given 5 years per model for end of auto update, I thought, well, that's just not acceptable, because if you bought one that's been out for a couple of years, you only had 3 years left on it. So we had worked out a structure so that we could rotate them out, and then we realized that they started upping it, and that caused its own problem, because just like you said, Ashley, at some point the device doesn't last as long as the auto update.
Yeah.
So you got to make those calls. But we do the same thing. We're doing 200 to 300 a year, which equates to a couple grade levels. So you almost have to, unless you want to be hit all at one time with a big expense.
I'm interested on the pricing, because usually I can usually get them about $230 a piece plus the $30 Chrome OS. So I'm usually about $260 a device.
And that's where we are.
Okay.
I just threw out.
Okay.
I just threw out a number. Like, where y'all buying your devices?
Are you getting
what vendors are y'all
touchscreen
using?
or something like fancy?
No.
Okay.
I will say this, though. Something that we've realized recently is that the OS, which they update all the time, is getting larger. So the minimum device now, we're afraid, is going to eventually not be able to support the OS. So we've started, just in this last purchase, started upgrading the memory to the next level, just to kind of future-proof them a little bit.
That's a good idea.
So.
Do y'all do white glove? Do they asset tag them and roll them, all that stuff? Or do
We,
y'all do that
we do
in-house?
that all ourselves. We've got
And
a
that might be
device.
the price difference.
Yeah, and
we
that
don't
may
do
be
that.
part of
Yeah,
it,
we
yeah.
don't do that.
We've got little Arduinos that we program. We have 6 of them that have a script on them. So you plug them into the
Little rubber
USB.
duckies.
Yeah, exactly. And you turn it on, and then it auto configures.
Yeah.
And then we do our own asset tags. I created a little mail merge template that has all pertinent information: PO, purchase date, end of auto update, the group, the campus. We've started incorporating the Destiny asset tag on that same label, and it's just one label that we do. But we do all that during the summer when we have summer help. So we haven't white gloved. I'm not saying we never will,
Right?
Because some of that's pretty slick. I had a vendor the other day say that hey, we can put logos on them. We can take your asset tag, base that information, and etch them into the device. But and of course, I'm not the one sticking them on there. The kids are during the summer. So I'm saying right now it's pretty easy. But if I ever had to do it myself, white glove may be something we switch to.
Yeah, I mean, so in Breckenridge, the first few years we had Chromebooks. My wife did everything herself, literally start to finish.
Yeah.
It was all one person and maybe a couple of her paraprofessionals, but. So we definitely have enjoyed the white glove, getting them, and they're already there. We're not having to enroll 150 devices or whatever.
And I can see that. I can understand that.
Yeah.
So,
All right, so this is a big one in the last couple years, but how are you guys seeing AI affect students and teachers in your schools?
Well, the first thing that always rears its head is you get a call from a principal saying, "Hey, we want to block AI." And then you have to explain that that's not possible, because it's in everything, it's everywhere. For every 3 sites I block, there's going to be 10 that come up tomorrow. And trying to get people on board with it. It's more about learning how to manage it and how to utilize it correctly. Just like I'm sure in 1997 they were like, all right, how do I stop the internet? We're doing research papers, but by gosh, we're going to only use books.
Right.
Well, with new technology, you've got to learn how to manifest it in the right way. I don't know I don't have any data on how many of my teachers are using it. I'm sure that they're finding things like brisk teaching and magic school. I'm sure they are. We do not supply anything as a district at this point. But I know that if I was in the classroom, that would definitely be something I'd be leaning on to get my stuff done.
Right.
And do y'all have magic school?
We haven't
True
bought
Ball or
it.
anything?
No, we are buying Teacher Made, which is classwork, and it has a couple little features in there. But no, we haven't bought anything yet. And ours use Canva a lot. But yeah, it's just having those conversations with your admin and with your teachers, and trying to explain how to use it, how it's going to benefit you. It's not going away. So
Right.
How are we going to use this to our advantage, and it's about teaching the kids how to use it responsibly. Like, it's here, it's not going anywhere. So how do you teach them to use it to take some data and create a paper and take it and revise and edit and just use it responsibly, and it's just going to take time.
It's kind of like the calculator in the math class.
Yes.
Like, yes, I mean, obviously in my daily life, I'm going to use a calculator all the time, but I have to know the how that math works behind the scenes for me to know if I'm doing the right thing. So we've got to figure out a way to get kids to not just go in and say, write this paper for me, but instead say, here's my paper. Can you find where I can make it better? Things like that.
Yes.
And I mean, that's how I use it all the time. Like, I'll write an email and I'm like, is this the right tone? Is this, or oh wow, this explanation got really wordy. Can you make this more concise and on an 8th grade reading level?
Well,
And
in your example, I mean, it's amazing to me, and I figured that technology would catch up to get past the being able to engineer a prompt. And I made the comment back when I first learned about ChatGPT that the company that comes out with an interface that doesn't require that a teacher know how to create a comprehensive or a complex prompt is really going to nail it. But it's gone way beyond that. I mean, just like you were saying, you'd have to block Google. I mean, Google's got an integrated AI now that if you do a search at the top, it gives you the AI summary. Well, obviously we're not going to be able to do that because it's integrated in everything we have. But I think we're almost past that point where they're going to have to know how to create a complex prompt or know how to use AI to create anything, because I think it's now going to be embedded in just about everything we use, or that product's not going to be competitive.
or they've used, like you said, they've created the thing that takes that scaffolding. Or I'm trying to think of this is going to have to be cut right here, I guarantee. No, they've taken that guesswork out. So instead of me saying, create a bell ringer activity for a 5th grade classroom of this, it's like, here's a button, bell ringer activity, drop down,
Click it.
pick your class
Yeah.
grade, pick your subject. Okay, perfect. What teak do you want? This one. Here's an activity.
Yeah.
You know, it's taken that having to structure the prompt the right way out of the equation. A lot of them have. And
Oh, absolutely.
that makes it so much more palatable for teachers. you
And,
know.
and I'm not pushing one product or another, but I do know that in getting ready for, I shouldn't give away our secrets, getting ready for podcast, Magic School actually has a podcast outline creator. You go in and tell them what you want to talk about, and it'll create an outline. And then as you go, you can go in and enter in tweaks to it, and it'll recreate it. As a matter of fact, the outline that you looked at earlier was created that way.
Yeah.
And I don't know that even a teacher would correlate AI with the fact that it's spitting this out, because it's seamless at this point. So
Yeah, how long would it have taken you to make this
It'd have
outline?
taken a long time.
You know?
Yeah, it would have taken.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously. I mean, and I'm bad about taking too much time to try to get it just right. But this was spit out in about, I don't know, a couple seconds, and then I
Yeah.
tweaked it over about 30 minutes, and that was it.
That's awesome.
And what's cool about it is that actually is on the student side
Yes,
of Magic
I couldn't
School.
find it at
And
first because it was on the student side.
as we've looked at analytics, there are teachers who are using Magic School, but I couldn't find very many who were unleashing it with the students. And so I've gone in and tried to show them that there's this whole other side of it. And like you said, we need to be having those conversations. We need to be showing the kids how to use it responsibly, because the fact of it is, if they're going to graduate and be in the workplace competing for jobs with people who already have those skills.
Right.
And we don't want them to get beat out because it's going to take them 3 hours to do what somebody can do in 30 minutes because they knew how to use AI.
And it's just another shift. Whereas, in 1970, memorization of facts was probably pretty important because you couldn't just reach into your pocket and pull out a computer and get the information. Like, hey, when was that battle? Let me just Google it real quick. And so it's kind of a shift that we're going to have to think of, that maybe some of the skills that we've been pushing onto our kids aren't as essential now as they were 10 years ago. And so instead we need to teach them how to be a little bit more adaptable and to be able to discern whenever they have this thing printed out for them in 30 seconds that, oh wow, this is a hallucination, this is not right, or to look at that image and realize, oh, that person has 9 fingers and one of them's bent sideways, that's not a real image. Teaching them those next skills that just come about as a result of this.
Yeah, I don't think today's students know the struggle of encyclopedias.
No.
I mean, your family, encyclopedias were not cheap.
No.
And you guys don't remember this, but I do.
Oh, I do. We had Encyclopedia Britannicas from like 1976, and I used to read them for fun because I was that nerd.
And they were that 76 version was used for years.
Yes.
I mean, it's not like you had the money to buy a new version
Yeah.
every year. So when new stuff came out, you know.
In fact, that was one of my brother and I. We would. It was kind of fun. We'd pull it out and be like, we'd try to find one let's find one that's really out of date, like video games, and we pull it open like, haha, it's talking about Pong. You know? Now let's go play Mario Brothers. You know?
Yeah.
That's awesome. So do you guys think that any training or preparation is necessary on the teacher side of AI?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, when it comes to things like that, I think of teachers just like students. Like if I just say, here's a thing, they're not going to figure it out. They're gonna use like the top 10% of it, and that's it. But if you can get them to buy in and see the use of it and train them how to use it the right way and see how it will make a daily impact on their practice, and they're not going to get that from just being thrown in, I don't think.
Right, because their
They don't have
knee-jerk
time.
reaction was, well, we'll just go back to pen and paper.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I mean, they were like, if they're going to have to write something, they're going to have to write it in class, live, with pen and paper. I'm like, that's not the solution. So we just had to have those conversations. And we kind of handpicked some certain teachers and made sure that they went to some of the things that were held at Region 14 on AI, just to kind of get them thinking about, different ways to use it and how this can make their life better and not to go back to pen and paper. And so I think they're grasping it, they're getting it. It's just, I think they're just scared of like what that's going to do to the validity of what the kids produce. So,
Right.
They just need to come I think it's just going to have to be a little air of skepticism on everything, But that's been around for years. I'll never forget, I was in a history class in high school, and we got a term paper back that we had all had to write this big research paper, and the guy who had the locker next to me was so upset because he got a 76 on something. He's like, man, I paid $50 for this. I'm like, dude. So it's not new. Cheating is not new. Kids will always find a way to use whatever they can to get an edge. But
also like teaching them that it's not cheating.
It's not cheating.
Really,
yeah.
like, because that's what they're thinking, It's
It's
not,
a
they didn't
resource.
produce it, so, but I'm like, in what job do you do now? Do you not use your resources? Like if the principal or your boss tells you, create this outline, like, are you not going to go use your resources? Like,
Right.
Or ask other people or get other people's help? And so how's that different, As in today's world, you're going to always use your resources, but you're telling this kid, write this paper, but don't use your resources, I don't know.
I think it's funny because and I point this out with Stacey when she'll ask me a question about a document, but and it's not isolated to here, but people will ask, hey, did you use, ChatGPT or did you use AI to generate that? And I think it's funny because who do we walk up to when they give you some numbers and go, hey, did you use a calculator for that? I mean, we're way past that now, and eventually we'll be way past that with AI.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be part of everyday life. I mean, it's just going to be part of the process. So, question about AI, though. I want to see if you guys, do Ashley or Vince, do you guys either one have the pay version of ChatGPT 4.0?
No.
No,
Have you used ChatGPT in the last couple days?
not in the last week,
No, not
probably.
last
So yesterday or the day before, in preparing for this podcast, I was asking it a question. It wasn't this outline, but asking it a question. And after it answered my question, it asked me another question, asking me basically, what's your intent with that data? And I answered it, and then it prompted me again. And that's a conversation that wasn't continuous, but it went on all day. I mean, off and on. I mean, whenever I came back to my desk, there was another question. I thought, that is just strange. I've never had it do that to me before. Well, near the end of the day, at the bottom of the screen, it says, your trial version of version 4.0 has ended. Click here to upgrade. Well, I'd never used 4.0 before, so I didn't know that's what, but it literally just struck up a conversation with me about the subject that I initiated at the beginning. And it kind of honed the document, but it was all prompted. I didn't have to continuously, throw things in. It was asking me, okay, which direction you want to go, or that's a great way to do this. Have you ever thought about that? Or how would you like? And it gave me 3 options. I said, well, I'd like to do it this way, and it changed it up.
And see, something like that I think would be really great with students.
Yeah.
Because, like, I was a big fan of the Socratic method when I was in the classroom. You know, a kid wants you to give them the answer, and I'm not going to do that.
Nope.
So I'm going to prompt you through until you figure it out on your own. So if your kid comes in and says, "Hey, I want to write this essay," like, well, let's brainstorm some topics. You know, what's the length? You know, what are some things? What are some ideas about that? And if it could kind of proactively prompt the kid to create their own deal and help them along the way, like, that's a great sentence, but could blah 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 this be better?
And I think there's a lot of possibilities there with character chatbots and enabling kids to have a conversation with a historical figure, or I know we have a teacher who they do a project about a mathematician. So they could actually have a conversation or a simulated conversation with that person rather than just Googling and doing research on them.
It's like the modern day version of when we used to dress up like Abraham Lincoln and you know, get in front of the class and talk.
Exactly.
It's the updated version.
Teach like a pirate?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's very
Have
cool.
you guys, talking about what Stacey was alluding to a second ago, have you guys used Notebook LM, Google's Notebook LM very
I
much?
was just looking at that.
I've not used it much. I've been exposed to it, but I have not dug into it yet.
It's Mike's new favorite tool.
Oh, it's
I've heard it's amazing.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So sometime we'll sit down and I'll show you some things that I learned, but I want to learn a lot more. I've already volunteered to present on that just so I'd be forced to learn it.
Yeah, it's going to be great though. And you can actually, it generates a podcast, but you can actually have a conversation with the podcast.
That's the thing. Luke Hurst did a workshop, and he had the whole podcast thing, and it's crazy. He typed in, "Here's the topic," and it's just two people sitting and talking. I mean, your listeners may not realize that we're actually real.
Right.
Did he demo the join button?
No,
It's in beta, and Stacey told me about this. And I thought this was funny. It's the funniest part about this. We were sitting there listening to the one we just generated, and she leans over and she goes, "Click on the join button," as if they could hear what I was saying. So I click on the join button, and it hesitates and goes, "Oh, look, we've got someone that wants to contribute. What do you got to say?" And it prompts you.
Oh my goodness!
And you can make your comment or your question, and it will address it, and then it just keeps on going.
And it wasn't,
wild.
I mean, there was no hesitation.
Nope.
It was just very natural, and they answered what he asked, and they
Like,
kept
oh, we've
going.
got a caller.
That's
Caller
what
on
it
the
is.
line.
Yeah, if you generate another one, look below it.
Okay.
It'll have a join or
That's
join now
awesome.
button, and it's impressive.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what they do next.
Oh
It's
yeah,
really cool.
yeah.
So I'm sure you guys see the value in this, and I know y'all have had discussions at TCA and Region 14, but how can rural schools support each other when it comes to asking questions or overcoming some of these challenges that everybody else is facing too?
And when this segment came up, and this is something that I had put in here because I think that the support question's not obvious, and I made some notes that I'm talking about things like the consortiums or Dig In, digital innovation, or the cybersecurity co-op, or the service center itself. I mean, those are ways that we can group together and support each other. But I mean, what are some other ways that we can help each other that you guys have either implemented, thought about, seen in other places maybe?
Well, one thing that's been beneficial for me is just having a direct contact at a similar district. I mean, y'all are probably the two closest in our area to our size and our student population, our makeup of our schools, how our devices are laid out, our departments. I mean, there's such a value in having that person that you can shoot an email to. Hey, this is a situation we ran into. Have you run into it? What did you figure out? And I think that's also been such a valuable piece of getting to present at the service center and getting to present at TCA with you, Mike, is now there's this kind of a larger group of people who are in similar situations that we can rely on.
Yeah.
I love things like the TCEA forum and stuff because I can go on there and type my question, but then inevitably I'll get a question back or a response back from somebody in like, Fort Bend ISD or Irving, and I'm like, that y'all have 37 technicians. It's not the same environment,
Right.
Yes. So a lot of times, I don't know if others do this, but a lot of times I will put in there, here's my issue I'm running into. Here's the situation. We have 1,300-ish students. We're an hour away from a city, because that changes the way things, the way you can do things. We're all, like you mentioned, the cybersecurity co-op. The reason that's so beneficial for us is because we don't have time in our day to think about, cybersecurity. We don't have somebody on staff that's all they do.
Right.
Or a team of people.
And we don't
That's all
either.
they do.
I mean, we pay for services
Yeah.
to handle that because there's no way to stay on top of it.
No.
It's just crazy.
Yeah.
So.
So that, I mean, things like that. Any way to get a connection with another school that's in the same boat.
But
to
I
me
think
is so
that's what
beneficial.
prompted you to put the discussion forum together in the first place, is that, you could have these discussions or attend sessions that address the large schools, but it doesn't address, they can't see that small schools have a different set of issues. Some of them overlap,
Right.
but a lot of them are unique to small
Well,
schools.
the issues overlap, but the tools we have to attack those issues are vastly different.
Right.
I mean, the three of us are very lucky in the fact that we have people like Stacey and people like in our wheelhouse that you got people who that's their one thing they do is that, I mean, they do everything, or one person that does everything. They are managing the purchasing, managing all the data syncing, and they're also teaching that web design class and driving the field trip bus. And I mean, people in a department of 30, 40 people with 40, 50,000 students, they'll never understand that world. Just like I'll never understand their world.
Right. Yeah.
And I think it goes back to the budget part too. Is the way I've used these conversations lately is just, we needed to upgrade our phone system and change our printing, upgrade our printers and all that kind of stuff. And so just having a soundboard to ask these other schools that are like us, what are y'all purchasing? What's your pros and cons? Because we can't make a mistake and buy something that is not going to be financially a good decision or cause us too many issues. So just having the tech director groups that we can, or dig in, that we can talk to and say, what are you purchasing? How are you, how is that working out for you before we make purchases? So that's kind of been the most beneficial thing for me this school year, is just being able to ask other people, like, what are you buying before I make those decisions,
And also on the vendor side of things, there are some vendors that probably work better for a larger school than a small school. They're able to give small schools a little extra piece of service. Like, I know that we're not supposed to advertise for certain vendors or whatever, probably, but I feel like ClassLink, for me, they've understood that we are a small operation, and that they have made so many things easy for us that, and the level of attention they've given us is really impressive to me, even though we're so small.
Well, and those vendors, some of those vendors understand that the small schools don't have the resources. They don't have a person that's dedicated to programming those interfaces or making those connections. And they're going to have to take care of a lot of it if they want the business of small schools. And some vendors do a great job of addressing that. So.
Absolutely.
And so having those conversations and finding out that, that company worked really well with you and with your teachers, that's invaluable to me. That's so great.
So something else that's pretty different in a smaller community versus the city is that sense of community. So how are you guys seeing in your schools that engagement between the school and the community?
We use Parent Square for our communication piece, but that's really just more for parents. So the thing that we learned from y'all is the social media piece. And so we, kind of followed Clyde's lead on how to do that. And we used that social media for schools, which y'all had used for some kind of training and insight. But just getting our social media out there and the growth in our views and our interaction with the community has been huge, and the parents and the community just love seeing all this happening in the classrooms, because before we did the highlights and you had an elementary page, a middle school page, and a high school page, and just understanding how their algorithms work on Facebook and social media, and condensing down to one Merkel ISD page, and just being able to share. We have, I don't know how many posts go out a day, but our instructional tech, Alicia, does that piece, and it's very time consuming. But we have teachers, and even sometimes community members. They'll take a video of a principal outside in the rain helping a kid and send it in, and so then we can put it on our social media, and just highlighting the good things, because everyone likes to get on on those Facebook groups and bash.
Yep.
So if we don't tell our story and we don't share the great things that are happening in Merkel ISD, then how's it going to get out there, you know? And so that has been huge, I think, for our community involvement and just getting people to see the great things that are happening. So
Yeah,
See,
I love that.
I love that idea. Like, I wish we were doing that. We're not. We still have, a dozen different Facebook pages for all of our different organizations and campuses. And I do see that. I see that they fight each other for views, and a lot of times the same information will go out on 3 different places. But then because it's not getting pushed the same way with the algorithm, you'll have some people that don't see it. So even though it on the surface, like, yeah, we published that in 3 or 4 different places, it's still not getting the reach that we need. We had a situation where we had to real hurriedly have an early release a couple weeks ago because it looked like weather was going to hit right at drop off. So they made the decision we're leaving school an hour early, and there was a huge disconnect in where that news got filtered out, and there were large pockets of the population that didn't get that in a timely manner, and part of me was like wondering how much that would have been affected by if we were doing a one post place type deal. But that's a topic for a different discussion, I
Right.
guess.
Well, and it is hard in terms of the consistency of it, but also just thinking about it as your school's brand. If you've got multiple people and all these different pages and the content and the way that they frame a post or the caption, it's going to come across different, or whatever the graphic is. And like you said, if you've got the same information but you've got 4 different graphics, okay, well, which one do I look at? Because this one says 6:30 and this one says 7. Which one's
Exactly.
right? And so it's hard for the community, grandparents or whoever who aren't going to be on your parent square to know where to get that information from.
Well,
So.
and that's something too. Being a rural school is, whenever I was doing my dissertation, a lot of it focused on rurality. And one of the things that's interesting is that if you do have a school in your rural place, that becomes the community, almost like attitude and ethos. Like, so people who have absolutely no connection to any student, any teacher, any building, they kind of ride the wave of success and failure and positivity and negativity with the school district. And so it's so important for us to have good, clear, concise, positive interactions in a public space like social media, because that can directly affect how our town feels, and so I follow several schools around us. I follow Clyde, I follow Merkel, Mineral Wells, a few others and it's always really fun to see the stuff that y'all post, and I get to interact with it as somebody who's not even connected at all with the school.
Right.
And it's really exciting.
Well, and and this is no surprise to my staff, I'm not a big fan. I have not been historically a big fan of social media. I think it has probably more pitfalls than it does benefits, but I'm actually coming around. Something that I know for a fact it does, it increases the numbers of attendees for different events. And if you think about it, we're here for the students. And if you don't know an event's happening, it's kind of hard to attend. So I know that when the social media lets the community know that something's coming up in the next week or two, that they're more likely to show up for those events. There was a Gold Rush dinner a few nights ago, and they actually had to set up some new tables as people were coming in because it was so many. The turnout was so good, and I'm going to tell you, in most cases, this is not just isolated to schools. I mean, municipalities, cities have the same issue. Is if you don't get the word out, you're not going to have that participation or that attendance. And as an employee, we know that part of what we do these events for is for students to show what they've accomplished. So I think the social media thing, like I said, I think I'm being swayed the other direction. I think has become a very positive function of the school.
Well, and Ashley mentioned, that y'all have to tell your story. Because so often, if you go on social media, if you're seeing something about the school, it's like, oh, drop-off was terrible today, so-and-so
Right.
wasn't getting kids out of the car fast enough, or whatever, You see that negativity, and so social media, the school, then you can use social media to tell that positive story. And one of the things that we don't have in Breckenridge that y'all do is that with that central place is a lot of times the stories that we're telling is not getting out beyond a certain small group. I've got a kindergartner, and they did a donuts with dudes thing. So like dads, granddads, uncles, that type of thing came up and had donuts with their kids. And I think it was like, they were expecting, 50 or 60, and they had like 150 show up. It was great. It was huge. Great turnout. And so they posted about it on the East Elementary page, and shared all these great pictures of how great this event was. But if you don't have a student at East Elementary, you're probably not following East Elementary's Facebook. And so all these other people in town, they totally missed out on this great situation. And I think it's so important. And now in hindsight, I'm sitting there thinking, well, maybe what I should do more of is combing those campus sites and then pushing it on the district page, even though I'm not really in charge of the district page, but maybe that's something I could do to help. I don't know,
Well, and we have people send stuff in, so teachers will do something fun in their class. They'll take pictures. They know which kids we're not allowed to put on
Right.
social media, and so they handle that because we don't know every single kid.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they send it in, a little write-up of whatever they were doing that day, and then we handle the pushing it out to socials.
And that's
So-
one thing, like, since we started doing this, I mean, there's some awesome projects and things that are going in classrooms that I didn't even know about,
Right.
and most people didn't even know that they did that unless you were in that class and you were, a parent of a kid in that class, you didn't know what they did, that sim activity or whatever. And so it's just really cool to see the learning and the things that are going on, and not just highlighting athletics
Right.
too. Like, because I think before, like, that's just kind of what was sent in, and that's what people,
Oh, yeah.
knew was happening.
Well, that's what happens in
but-
the public eye. Once you get into that building and into that classroom, people aren't allowed in.
Right.
You can't.
Yeah.
You
Yes.
don't see that. And
Yeah.
so this is a way of showing, hey, this is the kind of stuff your kids or your neighbor or your nephew or whatever is doing.
I think it also, like, once we started doing it, promoted a little, not competition, but a little, like, boost
Yeah.
from one teacher to the next. Like, oh, they did that now. I want to do something really cool in my classroom.
Yeah.
I want to be highlighted on the Facebook page. And so we have an email. It's socialmedia@merkelisd.net, and so anyone can send in stuff to there, and they know that now. And so, I mean, it's crazy. We've been just doing it a year, and
Yeah.
it's just insane how much it's
I think
changed.
that's fun to see campus to campus too.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, for sure. Yes.
So, and for people who maybe aren't doing that, I think a good way to get ideas is, like you said, to follow other
Yes,
schools
yeah.
and see what content they're putting out, see what kind of engagement, how many likes, how many comments, all that good stuff, and just check multiple different ones. I know for us too, we have parents and the grandparents and community members, but we also have businesses in town who like to keep up with things that are going on, and alumni who aren't necessarily here anymore, but they still want to keep up with things that are happening at the school. So I think that's been really cool.
Is that something y'all did, like an alumni quiz, or you'd ask a
Yeah,
question
so
about?
like, that social media for schools, you pay like a subscription or whatever, and they kind of provide you some access to materials and ideas. And so, like, I can't remember what it was, like Way Back Wednesday or something like that, or Throwback Thursday. And so, on Thursdays she would post some kind of, thing, do you remember this? And then people that, like you said, don't even have a kid in school, they're going on and posting their memory of, some diner that was in town or whatever, and so just to get the more clicks and the more comments that you get, that's going to help your algorithm. And so you need to be posting things that are going to get interaction. And so doing that, and that platform, that social media for school, kind of teaches you all that stuff. And then we learned a lot, from Clyde. So we still,
It's funny
we still
'cause
y'all's ideas.
we just did a Throwback Thursday last week, and it was
The
a
first one?
statue that two alumni had actually made, and it's on one of the campuses. And so people were saying stuff to Mike about it, that they saw the post, and like, oh, that's so cool. And, if that's not the campus that you're on, you forget that it's there because not everybody
And it
goes
teaches
to
those
everybody.
kids the history of,
Oh, yeah.
of some of the things
Yeah.
that are, because the kids are on there too. I mean,
Well, I bet the-
we do Instagram and Facebook. The kids are on Instagram.
Right.
So,
Well, we have a statue on the top of the Breckenridge High School of a buckaroo, a guy riding a bucking horse, and it was gone for a long time, and they put it back whenever I was in high school. And so these Clyde people that were interested in statues apparently also were interested in ours because they found it in a storage room in Clyde.
Really? Really?
Apparently in the early 80s, some kids from Clyde had come over and
got
taken it down.
Finally returned.
Finally.
That's awesome. All right, so let's talk a little bit about professional development because I know that that is huge. What are some ways that rural schools can provide that professional development for the staff?
we're blessed that we do have an instructional tech. And so she, her job, she not only goes in the classroom and does projects, but she does a lot of our PD and training teachers. And she'll offer sessions in the summer or say, we have a staff development day, like a little, piece here, just like the other day. We did the classwork PD on a staff development day, but that's hard. It's the hardest piece. I think is finding the time. You can't and don't want to take away teachers'
Right.
conference. We try to use PLC's time, but not all our campuses have that. So that is the biggest probably struggle and the hardest thing is there are all these really great tools, but how do you get that information to them in a time on their time schedule. She also does a weekly like tech tip email that highlights a new cool tool or something like that, and so we're using that as a way to get information out to teachers. Finding that's really hard.
It is hard. We're a 4-day week, and so that means we start school earlier, which means that they've really squeezed our in-service time at the beginning of the year, and so. I mean, trying to get a 30-minute session in 4 days is impossible, and so it is tough. And then we do have PD days throughout the year, but usually those are taken up with I don't want to say like more pertinent stuff, but stuff that is more pressing
Data.
for classroom teachers in that moment. It's data. It's disaggregating. It's contacting parents and kids and tutoring, and I mean it's tough. It's tough to get in there.
I think one of the hardest pieces is onboarding new staff.
Right.
And so the last 2 years we've done a Google Classroom and we send it out like, soon as they're hired in the summer or whatever, we try to send it out to them. And we just try to create a Google Classroom where they could go in and on their own time and, watch videos or training on all these tools and the things that we have. But because otherwise when you start back, those brand new teachers to your district are so overwhelmed by everything else, So we try to get them to go through a Google Classroom to learn how to use our grade book, how to, do the things that they're going to need to do. And that I think has helped, but it's still so much data on a new teacher, especially if they're a brand new teacher, but just new to the district teacher.
Yeah, it's amazing
They
how
have
much
a lot to learn.
every district is unique. So it's like they do this thing. They do a little boot camp in Breckenridge, and so it's broken up into small groups and then small 45-minute, hour-long presentation times, and I always have a time, and I can see it in their eyes that it's like this is on day 3 of new teacher orientation, and they're just like, I need to get to my classroom and see how many desks are in there, and so I feel bad if I'm like, all right, one more thing I'm going to show you, I try to make a point that if you ever need one-on-one or whatever, I'm more than happy to come. But then there was one year that I even said once a week I'm going to be at a campus all day, and I'll be there and I'll bounce around to classes. I'll help out, and they're overwhelmed with other stuff. It's hard. It's hard to get that buy-in. It's not that they don't want it. It's just that it's. They're busy eating an elephant, and for me to throw one more piece of food at them is just not going to work at that
Right.
moment.
And we see that with our new teacher orientation. We do that. It's usually 2 days or the best part of 2 days. But you can see by the end of that second day that they're overwhelmed, and the stuff you're giving them probably is not going to sink in.
Yeah, it's just bouncing off.
Exactly. So, we do the best we can, and we make those, same offers. Let us know, and we'll come out and help. But you're right. I think they're just so overwhelmed that they don't even have time to call and ask for some guidance.
And I love the asynchronous, like the Google Classroom, and like here's the videos. But then I wonder how often do they like? Okay, I'll get to that.
Right.
And then they never have a chance to get to that. It's just like
Yeah, because I know like ClassWise, how to use ClassWise is in our Google Classroom, training for new teachers. And then, last week someone was like, "Oh, we have a program that can monitor kids." Like, yes, it was in your training, but, and we have like a little, Alicia made like a tech handbook, and it's like with little tabs and a digital handbook that they can click on and okay, how to do this, how to do that they can refer back to. But like I said, they don't ever, necessarily do that. So,
Right. It's just easier to ask sometimes. What about required summer trainings? What does that look like in y'all's districts?
As far as technology, we don't have any specific required trainings that I'm aware of. I mean,
we have offered them, but the problem is that they have to go to a GT update or they have to go to this, certain things at the service center. And so, we'll get 30 people sign up and Alicia will work on creating this great presentation for a training, and then come day of only 5 because they end up having to be required to go to other things. So, so last year we didn't do it. We invited everyone to go to the Innovate EDU at Region 14, and I think that's kind of what we'll push this year is that's a really great thing for them to go to. And the teachers that went last year really enjoyed it, and I think got a lot out of it. So we like to offer it, but usually they have other things that they're required to do. So usually, it's like the 2 days is usually what they have to get in the summer, but now it's kind of not 2 days of their choice. Usually,
and that's hard because a lot of times they're paid ones in the summer. So
Yes.
it's like we don't want to pay for more than we needed to if we only need 2 comp days.
Right, yeah.
So.
we used to offer a kind of a technology primer. My wife and I would do it. We did it for several years, but then we noticed that it was the same people every year signing up because they enjoyed our workshop. And it's like, well, we're fixing to cover the same stuff we did last year, and sometimes they needed it.
Yeah.
Sometimes, people were like, oh, yeah, no, I need to be shown how to filter my emails again, or whatever it was,
And we had a lot of paras coming to the summer
Yes.
thing because they just had to mark off a checklist, but what was presented wasn't really
not their content.
beneficial to them. So it kind of wasn't a good use of Alicia's time. So
Right. What about
Or others,
bloodborne pathogens and that sort of stuff? Do y'all do that in Google Classroom, or are you using something like EduHero?
EduHero for us.
we do Google Classroom. So
Yeah, and we're doing Google Classroom here currently. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I'm going to throw y'all off for a loop because none of you know this question's coming. But
All right.
if funding weren't an issue, what is one project or initiative that you would want to launch immediately?
I know what I would.
you go first then.
We'd create a CTE center,
Well,
a CTE facility that would house all of our CTE programs. I just think that the benefit to the students, and it's one of the things that rural districts don't have the luxury of. We just don't have the resources to, well, for the most part. I know there are some that can pull it off, but it's just tough to create those environments where you can dedicate a facility to CTE and be able to have workshops and places to put those tools that you may be able to purchase or may be able to get through a grant. But CTE center would be if money was not an object.
That's
Yeah.
funny. That's where my
That'd be
mind
cool.
first went, but then I was like, well, is that really a technology answer for this, But I think that schools, that's where schools need to be putting their focus. We tried a bond 2 years ago, and we need a new middle school or an update, just remodel to our middle school. And then we had some CTE stuff in there, and unfortunately it didn't pass. But I just think that people didn't really understand what that program, could do for us. But they're just kind of focusing on the aging building and not, growth in the future. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, my first thought was immediately all new school buildings.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, our junior high is the newest building that's a like educational only building, and it's 1970, I believe, maybe 69. And I mean, both of our elementaries were in the 50s, so that affects us in the technology world because we have to try to retrofit 2025 technology to this 1954 structure. And people are like, well, I don't know why the Wi-Fi is bad because the access point's right there. I'm like, well, yeah, but that's going through a foot-thick cinder block wall. And and so that
Or there's
would be...
like 2 plugs in the entire
Exactly,
room.
2 plugs in the classroom,
you've
and one of
gotta-
them, if you plug something into that one, it blows that breaker.
Yes.
Which
We
is
have that
something that
struggle.
happens.
Yes.
Exactly.
As far as technology is concerned, if somebody said, "Here's a blank check, do what you want," I would. We would just all of our backbone infrastructure would be brand spanking new and beautiful.
Yeah.
New routers and switches and servers and cables run through proper cable management, and we're getting there. It's a long haul, but we are improving all that stuff. It's time and money. If we had all the time or all the money in the world, we could do a lot of things.
Absolutely.
Maybe we take that money and find a way to like get subs for teachers so that they could get PD.
There you go. There you
Maybe
go.
that would be the best use of funds is just, getting teachers the PD they need without having to, worry about their classroom
Yeah.
time.
That would be nice. What is something that rural schools are getting right that you think other places could learn from?
Oh man. Okay.
I know that's a loaded
This
question.
is a double-edged sword for me. So one of the things that I love about a rural school is it is more laid back. Like you're able to be personable with your employees, with your bosses, with your students, with your parents. I mean, there's such a collegial feel to things, which is great, and I think that's important. I think sometimes that comes at the detriment of having things very black and white in certain situations, which makes certain decisions probably tough for administrators along the way. But I think that the fact that we're sitting here, I don't feel like I'm competing with Merkel and competing with Clyde, even though I know our districts, quote, compete with other districts for students at times. One of the things that I've noticed that comes out of rural schools so readily is the willingness to help and to share ideas and to share resources. And like just a second ago, Ashley mentioned that Alicia made this little flip book thing, and I said, I want to steal that. And I know that if I email her after this and say, hey, can you send that to me? It'll be in my inbox in 5 minutes.
Right.
And just the willingness to help each other out is something I don't know if they get that in big schools. I've never been in a big school.
Yeah.
My entire career has been in Breckenridge, other than 3 months in Coleman and student teaching in Clyde, and spending a year at the service center. So it's and that's where I grew up too. So it's but I think that's what we're doing right.
Yeah, I would say the community piece, just that your community comes out and supports the school. I grew up in Trent and then have been in Merkel. I started teaching there and been there the entire time. So that's all I kind of know. But my nephews go to a bigger school and go into their games. Like, it amazes me, like the lack of, you're at a big 5A school and the lack of people in the stands for some events kind of shocks me. You would think they would be packed, but like there's more turnout for a small school game or a playoff game than we went to a playoff game the other day, and it was just in Snyder. It's not like it was that far, and the other team was from Lubbock and to Snyder, and so there weren't very many people in the stands for a playoff game. But if it was a small school, like
The whole
we
town would be
traveled,
there.
the whole town travels for a playoff game. So
Breckenridge
just that
hosted
kind of
one last night, and it was Nakona and Panhandle. Panhandle's like 4 hours away from Breckenridge, and there were several hundred people from Panhandle there. And the Nakona side was, my sons and I went to this game. We had to sit on the opposite side. We normally sit on the home side. We had to sit on the opposite side. There weren't seats.
Yeah.
And I mean, you just don't.
I think just, the community showing up for the kids in the school, I think,
Yeah.
is what you see.
So you got
as a
10
benefit.
basketball players down there. That means 20, 30 of them are family.
Right.
The rest of them, it's just people who care about the school
Right.
and care about that community feel.
I've never worked for a large district, but I will say that the community thing is what drew me to West Texas. I know that I worked out of Dallas for years and dealt with a lot of schools, big and small, but it wasn't until I spent some time out in this area that I realized that your school is the center of your town in a lot of cases. But you're right, you get good turnouts, and everybody knows everybody, and it's just a good feeling, and it's you kind of want to put yourself in that place. You want to stay there, and I know that is what drew me to West Texas. But the community piece, it really is big.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, that wraps up this episode of the Rough Draft Podcast. Thanks again to Ashlei and Vince for joining us and sharing their insights. And if you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes where we continue exploring other education topics. Thank you for listening to the Rough Draft Podcast.
Where we dive deep into the challenges facing K-12 education today.
From funding disparities and overcrowded classrooms to the growing pressure on teachers.
And the evolving need for students. We explore the real issues that shape our schools. Whether it's the fight for equitable resources, the impact of standardized testing, or the struggle to meet the diverse needs of learners.
We are here to bring the conversation to the forefront.
Join us as we unpack the critical topics, share insight, and brainstorm solutions to build a better future for education.